Tokyo, 2018. For perfect couples, modern Japanese society has clear expectations. Excellence is a must, and failure is unforgivable. In this context, Kazuki and Sakura are the ideal models that everyone looks up to. Kazuki is a charming, successful, and charismatic businessman. At every big and small event of the upper class, he always appears with confidence, elegant demeanor, and is the center of attention of everyone. With a lovely smile and a stable career, Kazuki not only wins the trust of his partners but is also the perfect model of a man that everyone admires. Next to Kazuki is Sakura, the perfect wife in everyone's eyes. She is not only beautiful, graceful, but also extremely delicate. Sakura takes care of everything in life, from work to family, takes care of Kazuki without a single complaint, always silently supports and stands behind his success. For Sakura, there is no room for error, and whenever she appears, she is always the embodiment of an ideal Japanese woman. And then there is Saki, Sakura's best friend, whom she always considers part of the family. Saki knows all of Sakura's secrets, from her marital difficulties to her hopes in life. Sakura trusts her completely and never doubts their friendship. But there is a dark secret that Sakura does not know. Her best friend is also Kazuki's lover. This secret relationship not only threatens Sakura's marriage, but also stabs the deep trust she has for both her husband and her best friend. Kazuki and Sakura, the golden couple of Tokyo. When mentioning Kazuki, people immediately think of the perfect model of a successful man, a charming, elegant businessman who always confidently appears in public with an attractive demeanor. Beside him, Sakura is the ideal wife in everyone's eyes. She is not only beautiful, but also the embodiment of gentleness and sophistication. Everyone around looks at their family as a symbol of perfection, of love and success combined, without a single blemish. But that is only what people are allowed to see. The reality behind that appearance is darker and more gloomy than anyone can imagine. Kazuki, the man who always appears perfect in public, the man Sakura trusts absolutely, is hiding a terrible secret. He had an affair, and not with a stranger, but with Saki, Sakura's best friend, the person she still considered a sister, the person who heard all her secrets, all her secret feelings. This double betrayal was not only a deep wound, but also the fuel for a cruel revenge plan, a plan that Sakura never thought she would carry out. One quiet afternoon, Sakura accidentally discovered something she was probably never ready to face. While checking her husband's phone, she saw a series of messages full of hidden meanings, words that a married husband should never say to another woman. What's more, the name at the top of each message was Saki, her best friend, the person Sakura had always trusted without a doubt. Scrolling through each message and image, every little detail confirmed to Sakura that her husband and Saki had gone beyond the limits of friendship. This discovery was not only shocking, but also set forth a cold reality. Her husband and her best friend had been hiding a secret for so long. Each line of text, each image passed by like a horrifying puzzle piece of the truth. Instead of reacting immediately, Sakura said nothing and put her phone down. She did not confront, did not question, did not want to reveal any thoughts. In that moment, an idea slowly formed in Sakura's mind. She decided to keep quiet and began to plan her revenge. A direct confrontation might help her ease the initial pain, but that would soon be forgotten. She realized that she wanted more than that, not just anger or a few words of criticism. She wanted Kazuki to pay slowly, to see him lose everything he had ever taken for granted. Each idea of revenge began to form in Sakura's mind, each step carefully considered. The plan was not just to get even, but to destroy Kazuki from within, to make him lose the masculinity and confidence he had always been proud of. Not a word of reproach, not a sign that her husband or best friend would realize what was coming. Sakura began to carefully study the effects of female hormones on the male body. She studied many scientific documents, grasping how this hormone could gradually weaken and change Kazuki's physical and mental state. Using female hormones for a long time would cause his testosterone levels to decrease, causing him to lose his inherent masculine characteristics. This change would appear slowly, be difficult to detect, and be difficult to reverse if done continuously. Sakura understood that if she skillfully introduced hormones into Kazuki's body, he would gradually change without realizing anything. After carefully studying, Sakura began to carry out the plan. She secretly purchased hormones and secretly added them to Kazuki's daily food and drink. Initially, the dosage used was very small, enough to not arouse any suspicion. The changes in Kazuki's body happened slowly and inconspicuously, so he was completely unaware of what was happening to him. As time passed, Kazuki began to feel more tired than usual. He thought it was just a sign of stress from work or pressure in life. Sakura continued to maintain the plan, systematically increasing the dose of hormones, causing the effects on Kazuki's body to become more obvious. His voice became softer, his skin gradually became smoother, and the muscles he was once proud of began to weaken. These changes were still mild, not causing direct suspicion. Kazuki felt uncomfortable about his physical condition, but he did not think deeply about the changes. Every time he mentioned feeling exhausted or having unusual changes in his body, Sakura just listened quietly and comforted him to rest. She did not express excessive concern, just enough to make Kazuki not worry and trust her care more. This gradually made Kazuki dependent on Sakura, considering her as his only support when he felt unstable. As time went on, the changes in Kazuki's body became more and more obvious. His masculine features began to fade. His voice became softer, and his facial features gradually changed. Kazuki began to feel something strange in his body, but he could not find a reasonable explanation. He believed that the changes were just a result of aging or stress, and never thought that he was being changed by external influences. His body continued to change silently but clearly. His masculine features were gradually replaced by weakness and fatigue. This made Kazuki worried about himself, but he still could not determine the specific cause. Sakura remained consistent in her approach, not showing any signs that she was involved in these changes. She continued to maintain a tight schedule, making sure that the process was gradual and unnoticeable. Kazuki became more and more confused and dependent on Sakura. He felt like he was losing control of his body, but he couldn't figure out why. Meanwhile, Sakura continued to maintain silence and control the situation from behind. The changes in Kazuki's body were now becoming obvious, but still not enough to cause direct suspicion from him. This process was proceeding smoothly as Sakura had planned. Not only did Kazuki's physical body change, but his mental state was also gradually affected. He no longer felt as strong as before. Instead, he felt anxious, tired, and lost confidence. The things that used to be his pride, his deep voice, his strong body, were now just memories. Kazuki became weaker, and this fit perfectly with Sakura's goal of revenge. Sakura continued her plan without anyone knowing. She didn't need to rush, and she didn't need to do much more. Everything was going as she had planned. Step by step, Kazuki was changing without any way out. After a few weeks, Kazuki could no longer ignore the changes in his body. His voice became softer, higher pitched than before. His skin became softer and smoother, as if his body was gradually losing its familiar protection. Worst of all, his muscles, which Kazuki had once been proud of, not only weakened but also gradually disappeared, leaving behind a lifeless, unfamiliar body. Every time he looked in the mirror, Kazuki felt like he was looking at a different person. He was worried, confused, but could not understand what was happening. In his confusion, Kazuki sought out Sakura, hoping that she could help him figure out what was going on. With a calm exterior, Sakura listened to all of her husband's worries without showing any signs that she knew what was going on. After he had confessed all of his feelings of helplessness, she began to carefully plant a new thought in Kazuki's mind. Instead of looking for health or age as the cause, she gently suggested that perhaps he was going through a gender identity crisis. "Maybe your body is adjusting itself, rediscovering itself," Sakura said, her voice calm, as if it were a perfectly reasonable possibility. She didn't force him to believe it, but her words were enough to sow doubt in Kazuki's already troubled mind. And Kazuki, who couldn't find any rational explanation for the strange changes, began to think more about what Sakura said. He no longer trusted his body, and that only made him more dependent on his wife. Whenever something strange happened, he would turn to Sakura, hoping that she could help him overcome it. Her every word only made Kazuki sink deeper into confusion, making him believe more and more that Sakura was the only one who could understand and help him face himself. What Kazuki didn't realize was that each of those comforting words was leading him in the right direction according to Sakura's plan. Sakura didn't stop at comforting Kazuki. She began to subtly steer the conversation toward a new idea. Maybe your gender identity isn't entirely male. She brought this up gently, as if it were just a possibility to consider. At first, Kazuki was confused by this foreign idea. But under Sakura's skillful guidance, he gradually began to think seriously about it. Without forcing him, Sakura gently encouraged him to discover himself and consider whether the changes in his body could be a sign of a gender identity crisis. In his confused state, Kazuki was drawn to this idea, unaware that he was the victim of an elaborate revenge plot. The changes in his body seemed to match what Sakura said, making him start to believe that she might be right. She suggested that he see a transgender specialist who could help him understand himself better. No longer able to reason on his own, Kazuki completely trusted and listened to his wife. Under Sakura's guidance, Kazuki decided to begin the gender reassignment procedures. Every step, from psychological counseling to medical tests, was done according to her advice. He believed that he was discovering himself, but in reality, it was all part of the revenge plan that Sakura had planned from the beginning. The truth was revealed one fateful day when Kazuki went for a routine medical checkup. The doctor's words left him speechless. His body had been changed by female hormones all this time. His heart pounded, panic overtook him. How could this be happening? The world seemed to collapse beneath his feet as the truth began to dawn on him. It was Sakura, the wife he had always trusted, who was behind it all. A sense of betrayal enveloped him, an indescribable horror. Kazuki rushed home filled with rage. The usually quiet house now felt like a battlefield. When he faced Sakura, his anger exploded. He demanded an explanation, his voice trembling with rage. But Sakura showed no fear or remorse. She stood there, coldly looking straight into his eyes, then calmly confessed everything. This was her plan to avenge Kazuki and Saki's betrayal. Without a word of apology, without hesitation, she insisted that he deserved to pay for what he had done. Every move she made was calculated from the beginning. Every step he took was part of the cruel revenge plan she had set up. Her words were like a cold knife cutting deep into Kazuki's self-esteem, pushing him into an emotional storm he could not escape. What he once thought was his wife's support and comfort now became an obsession. He had been turned into a tool for his wife's own plan. No excuse could save him from her cold punishment. Kazuki's anger exploded like a time bomb. Sakura's cold confession pushed him to the limit. Everything around him blurred in his angry gaze. No longer able to maintain his composure, Kazuki rushed forward, pushing Sakura down. The sound of the collision rang out, sharp and sudden like a blade cutting through space. Time seemed to stop. Sakura collapsed to the floor, her body still in an instant. No screams, no words. Only deathly silence. Kazuki stood there, his hands still shaking, his mind blank. His eyes were fixed on his wife's motionless body, and shock washed over him like a tidal wave. He had just killed her. The woman he had loved, now lying motionless before him, lifeless. Kazuki collapsed beside his wife's body, his mind reeling. His breathing was rapid, panic filling his chest, choking him. There was no time to think. With trembling hands, he pressed the phone to call the police. Every second felt like an eternity, but he knew the inevitable had happened. When the police arrived at the scene, Kazuki collapsed, as if all his strength had been drained. In a panic, he confessed everything. "I pushed her. I didn't mean to." His voice trembled, as weak as his broken mind. The police quickly arrested him. But Kazuki's eyes never left Sakura's lifeless body, the truth too cruel and the pain too great to comprehend immediately. Now his life had completely collapsed. All that remained was the dead silence of what he had just done. Kazuki's trial attracted public attention. Faced with the charge of involuntary manslaughter, Kazuki sat silently, his face tense and blank. His lawyer tried to defend his client, arguing that Sakura's death was the result of a moment of anger. He emphasized that Kazuki had no intention of killing his wife. It was just an accident that happened during a stressful time. However, the prosecution did not easily let that be a mitigating factor. The prosecutor argued that, although it was an impulsive act, Kazuki's violence directly led to Sakura's death. He emphasized that every action has consequences, and the law cannot ignore that fact. In the end, the court sentenced Kazuki to 15 years in prison for involuntary manslaughter. Although the sentence was reduced, Kazuki's tragedy did not stop at the legal verdict. He will have to live with the burden of guilt that he took the life of the woman he once loved. After the trial, Kazuki not only faces a 15-year prison sentence, but also has to face an even more painful reality. His body has completely changed. The months of being secretly fed female hormones by Sakura have transformed him into a different person, both physically and mentally. The masculine features that Kazuki was once proud of have now disappeared. His voice has become softer, his skin has become softer, and his muscles have become firmer. This change is irreversible, and he has to live in a body that he never wanted to own. Every day in prison is a nightmare with no way out. Kazuki is not only a prisoner of the law, but also a prisoner of his own body. All memories of his former self are now just a distant past. Regret and suffering haunt him endlessly, like a mental sentence that lasts for the rest of his life. Kazuki was trapped in an identity he never wanted, living a life he no longer recognized. His tragic end was not only in prison bars but also in the brokenness of his soul and body, with no way back.